We are breaking with convention. War, Peace, and the Presidency. Broadcasting from Denver. I'm Amy Goodman. The Democratic Party formally nominated Senator Barack Obama as their presidential candidate on Wednesday, making him the first African-American major party candidate in U.S. history. The historic moment came after Senator Hillary Clinton walked onto the floor of the convention hall and asked Democratic delegates to suspend their count and approve Obama's nomination by acclamation. Hours later, Obama made a surprise appearance before the convention, immediately following Vice Presidential nominee Joseph Biden's acceptance speech. Obama strode on stage before a roaring crowd of thousands of delegates. A day before he'll formally accept the presidential nomination before more than 75,000 people at Invesco Field.
The change is brought about because ordinary people do extraordinary things. And so we want to open up this convention to make sure that everybody who wants to come can join in the party and join in the effort to take America back. I think we are going to have a great night tomorrow night, and I look forward to seeing you there. God bless you. God bless America.
Obama's acceptance speech will fall on the 45th anniversary of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech on the National Mall in Washington. Earlier in the evening, former President Bill Clinton embraced Obama's candidacy, saying he's ready to be commander-in-chief and approving his choice of Joe Biden as his running mate. Biden accepted the vice presidential nomination with a speech that linked Republican John McCain to the foreign policies of President Bush.
As we gather here tonight, our country is less secure and more isolated than it has been any time in recent history. The Bush foreign policy has dug us into a very deep hole with very few friends to help us climb out. And for the last 7 years, the administration has failed to face the biggest forces shaping this century. The emergence of Russia, China, and India as great powers, the spread of lethal weapons, the shortage of secure supplies of energy, food, and water, the challenge of climate change, and the resurgence of fundamentalism in Afghanistan and Pakistan, the real central front in the war on terror. Ladies and gentlemen, recent years and in recent days, we've once again seen the consequences of the neglect, with Russia challenging the very freedom of a new democratic country of Georgia. Barack and I will end that neglect. We will hold Russia accountable for its actions, and we will help the people of Georgia rebuild. I've been on the ground in Georgia, Iraq, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and I can tell you in no uncertain terms, this administration's policy has been an abysmal failure. America cannot afford 4 more years of this failure. And now, despite being complicit in this catastrophic foreign policy, John McCain says Barack Obama is not ready to protect our national security. Now let me ask you this. Whose judgment do you trust? Should you trust the judgment of John McCain when he said only 3 years ago, Afghanistan, we don't read about it anymore in the papers because it succeeded? Or should you believe Barack Obama, who said a year ago, we need to send 2 more combat battalions to Afghanistan? The fact of the matter is, Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, the people who actually attacked us on 9/11, they've regrouped in the mountains between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and they are plotting new attacks. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has echoed Barack's call for more troops. John McCain was wrong, and Barack Obama was right. Should we trust John McCain's judgment when he rejected talking with Iran and then asked what is there to talk about? Or Barack Obama, who said, we must talk and make clear to Iran that it must change. Now, after 7 years of denial, even the Bush administration recognizes that we should talk to Iran because that's the best way to ensure our security. Again and again, John McCain has been wrong and Barack Obama is right. Should we trust John McCain's judgment when he says we can't have no timelines to draw down our troops from Iraq, that we must stay indefinitely? Or should we listen to Barack Obama, who says shift the responsibility to the Iraqis and set a time to bring our combat troops home? Now, after 6 long years, the administration and the Iraqi government are on the verge of setting a date to bring our troops home. John McCain was wrong and Barack Obama was right.
Biden accepting the vice presidential nomination last night. Today, instead of delegates heading to the Pepsi Center for the last day of the Democratic Convention, tens of thousands of people are going to Invesco Field, where Barack Obama will accept the Democratic presidential nomination exactly 45 years after Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech in Washington, D.C. Well, Danny Glover is an actor, a filmmaker, a well-known political activist. While attending San Francisco State University in 1968, Glover took part in the longest campus strike in the nation's history, when the Black Students Union and the Third World Liberation Front organized to create the first school of ethnic studies in the country. In this election, Danny Glover was an ardent supporter of John Edwards. After he dropped out of the race, Danny Glover threw his support to Obama. He joins us here at the studios of Free Speech TV in the 5 Points neighborhood of Denver, often called the Harlem of the West. Welcome to Democracy Now!
How are you doing?
It's good to have you with us, Danny Glover.
Yeah.
So your thoughts. This is certainly an historic day, both going back 45 years to the I Have a Dream speech of Martin Luther King, and what's going to happen tonight not at the Pepsi Center, where most of the convention is taking place, but in a stadium of more than 70,000 people.
Well, it certainly follows what John F. Kennedy did in his acceptance speech and having it at the L.A. Coliseum in 1960. Of course, we cannot get simply lost in the fact, or we have to respect the fact that this is a very important historic moment. But the question, as always, is that what do we make of this moment? You know, how are we poised now on the ground to push this candidacy, and not only this candidacy, and perhaps the presidency itself, to a position where we make real change? What resulted in that I Have a Dream speech was enormous legislation, from the voters' rights legislation signed to the housing registration, the war on poverty. All those came post-1963. And we might say that when we talk about the issues of equity in this country, job development, education, HIV/AIDS, health, all those particular things are things that are on the table domestically. And then we have to, when we talk about foreign policy, what does the democratization of this policy look like? What does the foreign policy look like? Certainly the Bush years have devastated the credibility of the U.S. around the globe. But now, what does it look like now? What kind of moves do we make? Now, we don't have the power as we had before. We may have the military power, but we don't have the power as the greatest producer of goods and services in the world. That belongs to China now. There are real questions that we have to ask, not only about that, about the globe, about global warming, all the things that have been pushed aside for the last 8 years. What sacrifices are we right now prepared to make the real changes that need to be made in this country?
You supported John Edwards. You stumped around the country for him. He loses in the primary, so you switch your support to Obama. Do you feel that what Edwards represented to you, and let me ask, what did he represent to you, is being represented by Barack Obama?
Well, I think that what Edwards represented represented to me and for so many others was that he positioned his candidacy on the issues, domestic issues around health care and poverty. As we noted as all of us noted in the early campaign days with Senator Clinton and also Senator Obama, that the person who focused on those particular issues was Edwards, and that he brought those issues to our attention. He talked about them, and he based his candidacy on that. That's the reason why. The fact that the idea, as we talk about Employee Free Choice Act right now, that would have been a tenet of an Edwards campaign or an Edwards candidacy as well, that we can use unions as the basis of establishing equity in this country, that we can talk about living wage, health care, pensions, etc., benefits, all those things, we can talk about that. So that was the basis of my support of John Edwards. And certainly we have to push this agenda. We have to define the agenda as we see it, and around that agenda mobilize and push the agenda. Now, there is, because of the current situation, something's going to happen. Let's not fool